There is a financial time bomb ticking in the US market. It's not the housing loan, not the subprime crisis, it is the private equity. Basically, private equity का मतलब क्या है? The players who buy companies, revive those companies, make it really profitable and earn out of the process. Revival specialists basically. But the game is nothing like revival over here. Private equity वो माफिया है जो revival के नाम पे कंपनीज को खरीदता है, फिर उसके ऊपर loans डालता है and finally leads to its slow death. Something similar of this sort was seen in 2008. I'll connect the dots later in the video. Private equities वो firms है जो स्टॉक मार्केट से अलग ऑपरेट करते हैं इन दी डार्क अनरेगुलेटेड स्पेस. इनके पास पैसा तो बहुत होता है, राइट फ्रॉम रिच इन्वेस्टर्स, इंश्योरेंस कंपनी, पेंशन फंड्स, एंड द मॉडल इज वेरी सिंपल. Invest in companies, revive them, sell them for a profit. But the real game is much darker. असल में ये लोग जब भी कंपनी खरीदते हैं, they use something known as the LBO, which is the leveraged buyout. In other words, they pay only a fraction and the rest is nothing but loan from the banks. Let us try and understand it through a simple example. मानिए कि एक कंपनी उनको खरीदनी है, which is worth $1 billion, यानी 1000 million. तो वो सिर्फ अपने पॉकेट से रफली $200 million निकालेंगे, रेस्ट $800 million का वो लोन लेंगे. नाउ यू विल से वेयर इज द प्रॉब्लम? वो कंपनी जिसको वो खरीद रहे हैं, द टारगेट एंटिटी, बेसिकली वो $800 million का लोन उस टारगेट एंटिटी में ट्रांसफर कर दिया जाता है. तो टेक्निकली जिस कंपनी को खरीदा जाता है वो अपने ही पैसे से अपने को खरीद रही है. आर यू गेटिंग द पॉइंट? नाउ द डार्कर पार्ट इज, जो टारगेट एंटिटी थी उसके बुक्स पे कोई भी लोन नहीं था. नाउ इट हैज $800 million ऑफ डेट ऑन द बुक्स. चलिए ये मैं आपको एक प्रैक्टिकल एग्जांपल के साथ समझाता हूं. 2005, Bain Capital और KKR, which are very large private equity firms, right? उन्होंने एक एक्विजिशन किया Toys R Us का for $6.6 billion. Can you guess the debt amount? $5 billion का उन्होंने डेट उठाया, which was later on flushed onto the books of Toys R Us. जो कंपनी के बुक्स में ज्यादा डेट ही नहीं थे, now they have $5 billion of debt on the books. किसके लिए? अपने खुद को खरीदने के लिए. Can you imagine? Now their interest payout was $400 million, right? So interest payout shot up and the company was cash strapped. Now no money left for innovation. Employees were getting thrown out. There were very less ways that they could focus on their strengths, expand and become a better organization. Later on, 2017 में the company files for bankruptcy. 30,000 लोग, they lose their jobs. Now this is the dark way private equity operates. Let me give you one more example. Golden Gate और एक PE firm जिसने Payless Shoes का एक्विजिशन किया था, राइट? उसको फिर से डेट में डाला, उससे और भी कर्जा उठवाया and finally the company went bankrupt. I'll give you one more example. Sears. Once upon a time, a very big brand in the US. What happened to it? PE-backed hedge fund manager Eddie Lampert. इन्होंने इस कंपनी को उठाया and then later on he did the layoffs, cost cutting किया in order to show short term profits. At the end of the day assets भी बिक गए, सब कुछ खत्म हो गया and the brand collapsed. Now let us get into the dark genius, how these PE firms operate and how they manage to make the money in 4 parts. Part number 1, उनका पहला पैसा निकालने का तरीका is management fees. Every year 1 to 2% is charged in the name of management fees. Second is supervision fees. अब हमने आपको खरीदा है, सो वी आर मॉनिटरिंग यू, हम आपको सुपरवाइज कर रहे हैं, अब हम उसका भी पैसा चार्ज करेंगे आपसे. थर्ड इज ट्रांजैक्शन फीस. खरीदते वक्त भी दे चार्ज फीस, राइट? बिकॉज वी आर हेल्पिंग यू टू रिवाइव, एंड व्हेन दे सेल अगेन दे चार्ज फीस एंड एग्जिट फीस बेसिकली. सो दोनों तरफ वो फीस चार्ज करते हैं. नाउ द फोर्थ स्टेप और द मेजर दैट दे टेक इज द मोस्ट टॉक्सिक वन. जब उन्होंने कंपनी को टेक ओवर कर लिया है, they do something known as dividend recapitalization. In other words, जिस कंपनी को उन्होंने खरीदा है उनको फिर कहते हैं फिर से आप एक बार लोन उठाओ और उस लोन से हमको डिविडेंड दो. सो बेसिकली टारगेट एंटिटी जिनको वो खरीद रहे हैं उनके ऊपर एक्विजिशन के टाइम जो लोन आया था एंड अ न्यू लोन, बेसिकली उनको डेट के अंदर बर्डन अप कर दिया जाता है एंड दीज गाइज कीप ऑन कलेक्टिंग फीस. यू कैन रीड अबाउट रेड लॉबस्टर, बेसिकली अ सी फूड चेन which almost went into bankruptcy due to the same reasons. In 2024 they are trying to come out again, but the debt burden is real high. So we are able to see the dark side of private equity, basically charging so much fees and draining out the entities of any bit of cash. So what are the fallouts of this? First of all, सबसे पहले employees के ऊपर असर पड़ता है, because it has been seen in the Harvard Business Review of 2020 whenever there is a takeover by the private equity, 4 to 5% of the labor force is removed, reduced in the name of cost efficiency. In the last 10 years, it has been noticed 20% of the companies taken over by the private equity route have filed for bankruptcy. To cite you an example over here, HCA Hospitals, which is owned by the private equity firm KKR, उन्होंने क्या किया? They reduced the number of hours of the doctors, nurses, and they also reduced the number of staff members over there, basically compromising on the safety of the patients. So just in order to show better profits in the short run, ये लोग क्या करते हैं? They reduce the number of employees, cut cost, and cut corners in order to ensure that they are able to do the so-called revival and make a 2x, 5x profit out of this. अब ये सोचो that trillions of dollars are managed by these private equity firms, और ये private equity firms जब भी किसी फर्म को खरीदती है उसके पीछे एक डेट का बड़ा टावर खड़ा कर देती है. And now you can see the kind of risk that we are looking at. So this tower of debt is in the form of bank loans, right? अब banks को भी ये loans रखना पसंद नहीं है. So now comes something known as CLO, collateralized loan obligations. अब ये क्या होता है? Now what happens is बैंक ने लोन दिया था प्राइवेट इक्विटी फर्म को, प्राइवेट इक्विटी फर्म ने वो लोन ट्रांसफर कर दिया टारगेट एंटिटी के नाम पर, एज वी सॉ इन द केस ऑफ टॉयज आर अस. नाउ टॉयज आर अस का एग्जांपल हम लोग लेके आगे बढ़ते हैं. दे हैव टू पे इंटरेस्ट टू हुम? द बैंक, राइट? Now bank has given so many loans to such private equity players and now they don't want to keep it on the books. तो वो लोग क्या करते हैं? इन लोन को बंडल करते हैं and they sell these loans basically in the form of CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. So investors like pension funds, insurance companies and even hedge funds actually buy such CLOs. उनको ये लालच रहती है because that they will get a higher quantum of return. Now you would be saying उसमें प्रॉब्लम ही क्या है? The problem is जिस कंपनी को अपने एग्जांपल में Toys R Us, they have to pay to the bank, right? And bank ultimately sells those collateralized loan obligations to other insurance company, hedge funds, pension funds, right? अब समस्या यहाँ आती है that the company is already having a towering debt on its head, right? Sometimes the debts are as large as 7 to 8 times of the EBITDA margins of the company. So there is a great chance that if there is some kind of financial difficulty, then there would be defaults. So the leveraged loan market of the US is close to $1.6 trillion. About 60% of these loans are bundled in the form of CLOs and 40% are termed as junk. So now this looks like a 2008 subprime story. Now you would be wondering, ये सब possible कैसे है? Because PE, as I told you, operate in an unregulated market space. There is no requirement कि वो public markets की तरह सारे disclosures करे. And can you see the irony? Who is investing in this? Insurance companies, hedge funds, pension funds, यानी public का पैसा है इसके अंदर. अगर आप देखो तो middle class के retirement के पैसे के साथ ये लोग basically उनको unemploy करने की try कर रहे हैं. Right? That is a very, very dark side of the private equity system. Private equity model को अगर हम लोग समझने की कोशिश करें तो it's very simple that the profits are privatized and the losses are socialized. अगर कंपनी सक्सेसफुल रही, टेक ओवर सक्सेसफुल रहा, रिवाइवल सक्सेसफुल रहा, then they would make 5x, 10x return by taking an exit and reviving the organization. On the other hand, अगर unsuccessful रहा, they have already drained all the money out in the form of fees and they have very little skin in the game. तो उन्होंने अलग अलग तरह की फीस और डिविडेंड लेकर अपना पैसा तो निकाल लिया एंड इफ इट फ्लॉप्स, राइट, लेट द एम्प्लॉइज सफर, लेट द टैक्स पेयर्स सफर, लेट द सिस्टम सफर. सो टॉयज फॉर अस की कहानी हो या फिर सीयर्स की कहानी हो, द पैटर्न इज वेरी सिमिलर. इट इज कंप्लीटली ग्रीड इन द शॉर्ट रन which is leading to destruction in the long run. आज प्राइवेट इक्विटी अमेरिका का 6% of the GDP कंट्रोल करता है. You can imagine the kind of exposure that they have. So अगर ये डेट का टावर गिरा, then not only Wall Street will get affected, the Main Street will also get affected. Employment will get affected, banks will get affected, taxpayers' money will get affected. So basically, this is the dark side of capitalism where profits are private and the loss is social for everyone to bear. So as of now, the interest rate cycles are going down. So that is not going to create a lot of pressure, but 3 things we have to keep in mind. If inflation becomes red hot, it can be a concern. If the interest rate start rising, it can be a concern. Or if the GDP starts contracting, then we can see this bubble burst. So you have to keep your fingers crossed and hope that things fall in place. But there is a bubble. there is this dark side of private equity, which is slowly creating a 2008 like subprime crisis. Not immediately, I'm saying, but definitely it is a area of concern that we should all look at, because ये अमेरिका तक सीमित नहीं रहेगा. If there is an issue, it will have ramifications across the globe, right? So this is the long story on how the private equity is playing the dark role over here. So if you want to understand such interesting stuff, follow for more. Thank you.